On this episode of the podcast, I interviewed head of the communications department at Bryant University, Dr. Kevin Pearce. We talked about the challenges COVID-19 has had on teaching, the effects the virus has had on the news cycle, how students can better their learning habits with the virtual classrooms, and much, much more. So, without further ado, let's get into it. I welcome on to the podcast professor at Bryant University for 22 years and chair of the Department of Communications, Dr. Pearce. Thank you for joining the program.
Thank you for having me.
So I want to start out with trying to just getting like a feel of what COVID-19 did for professors or anyone teaching on campus here. When did you view it as a real threat to Bryant University and the university actually closing down?
I think all of us, it was just before people were going away for spring break last year. And we knew that, kids being kids, spring break, there's no way, especially in the early stages, that people are going to social distance. And the real danger was going to be after people, got back from spring break. So I think really in the couple of weeks before spring break was when things became real. And the decision, I think, was good to not have people come back after spring break. And I think we were the first school in Rhode Island to actually pull that plug, which turned out to be a pretty good decision.
Mm-hmm. Now, being that you are a communications professor and you analyze the news cycle quite a bit, I would assume, what is something that you saw this virus do in the news cycle that you've never seen something like a media topic do before?
What's interesting about the COVID-19 is that, of course, with the thirst for information and the news organizations trying to get information out there as soon as possible, it's been really difficult, I think, because it's such a fluid situation. Things keep changing. And a good example is wearing masks, where people were told not to wear masks and then they were told to wear masks. And so I think that what has made this particularly difficult is just how fluid the situation is. The press always wanting to get out there with information right away. So I think that's one thing I found that's pretty odd, and then mixed signals from the government too on how bad it is and how important it is. I think has made it particularly difficult. And when you have top administration officials kind of devaluing the nature of the press, it doesn't make it any easier.
Yeah, a convoluted standpoint and where to progress is obviously a challenge for the public in finding correct information. From an academic standpoint, what do you think was the biggest challenge last semester as everything kind of transitioned on to online there?
Well, I think the biggest challenge was really for the people involved, both the faculty and the students. And I can speak, from a faculty perspective, I was lucky. I've taught fully online classes before, and I was aware of the technology, but we had some faculty members at Bryant who, I believe there were some that have never even used a laptop, right? And so there are some that really were not up to speed on the technology. And it doesn't mean these aren't fabulous professors, right? They're probably wonderful in the classroom, but as you know, as a student, you took courses. Being in the classroom and being online is very different. So I think, one of the biggest difficulties was just the quick nature. But I have to say, I think Bryant did a wonderful job. There were so many training sessions on getting people up to speed. And, from my perspective, what I saw was the faculty who were good in the classroom were also good online, right? And they made a real effort to make sure that that they did everything right. Mm-hmm. And so I think that was probably the biggest challenge overall. But like I said, I think the school did a good job with the technology aspect of it and lots of training. And it's still going on right now.
Yeah, and one of the key factors that makes Bryant so great is that the in-class learning environment separates itself from a lot of its competitors because they pride themselves on smaller classroom sizes and really good student-to-teacher ratio that you can kind of not only just know the students, but also know what they're thinking at that exact moment, which you don't really get at some other larger schools. We're in a seminar of maybe 60 or more students. Yeah. So tailing off of that there, how have you adapted your curriculum for this upcoming semester? Has it had any variance of the semesters prior, I would assume?
Well, of course, the schedule is made out a year ahead of time, and people are already registered. So, in regards to the courses that are being offered, we really didn't have the option to change that. But we have, all through this summer, we've been doing training on how to, effectively teach online. And the interesting part about what we're doing, and also what makes it difficult. So, I teach courses that are fully online.
Hmm.
So I meet with the students once in the beginning and I meet with the students once at the end, and that's it. But that's not really what we want to do, because we want to have a little bit more face time. We want to make this as much face to face as possible. And we also have to prepare for an in-class presence as well as online, because for the most part, they're going to be happening simultaneously, because they're going to be students, especially some international students may not even get back in time. We might have students that are sick. So all of the classrooms are being retrofitted with cameras. So each instructor will teach, most instructors will be teaching in the classroom, but maybe half of the students will be online, and then it switches, for the next class period. So there's lots of different scenarios. And so right now, to be honest, we're trying to figure all that out because it's such a fluid situation. Um, the priority is on freshman classes having the in-class experience, because the seniors, well, it's bad for them. They've been to college for 2 normal years at least, and they've had that college experience. So we really want to make sure the freshmen get as much of a college experience as possible during this time.
Yeah, as I mean, being the head of the communications department, I believe that the way you teach and the classes that you offer are a lot more difficult in certain situations than, say, like the accounting department. Whereas, like, you need a lot of on-hand expertise, right? So if you got Professor Monacawa who teaches the newsroom or something along those lines, it's a lot different of an outline than, say, if you're teaching like accounting 300 or something like that.
Mhm.
So what would you be doing a certain like special edge to it that would separate it from like online teaching if you can't even come back on campus for those classes?
Yeah, so unfortunately, but for us, the biggest problem for us are the studio courses.
Hmm.
I think we're teaching 6 courses that are being taught in the studio, basic television production, field production and editing. But fortunately, the studio guys, Tom Zimmerelli, Tom Dooley, have figured out a way, because those classes are capped at 20 students, they're relatively small, that we could have everybody in there utilizing the studio and still practicing social distancing. But as I said, there are going to be some students who get sick, right? So accommodations are going to have to be made. And you mentioned Mike Montecalvo. Mike did a good job, and just kind of adapting. Of course, he's a professional; he knows what to do. But all of the faculty who teach in our production area, they're working on now ways to incorporate for those students who can't necessarily be in the classroom. Just figuring it out. It's just something that they have to do. And luckily, we have some great faculty over there.
Yeah, and Brian places a lot of emphasis on like group learning
Mhm.
and assigning team projects. How do you see that changing this upcoming semester?
I love to say that overall in the Department of Communication, we probably have less group projects than in some other departments. But with Zoom and with other forms of technology, it's basically continuing on the way that it is. Just everything is remote, and everyone's sick of Zoom at this point, right? Nobody wants to get on another Zoom meeting. I was actually out, for an illness for a week, and for a week I didn't have a Zoom meeting. It was the best week of the summer, right? But everyone's sick of it, but it works, right? It works, and students are becoming much more adept at figuring out how to do it themselves. And I think you just plug forward. And like I said, we've had some pretty extensive training in our department, and we're fortunate in that 3 or 4 of our 9 faculty have already taught fully online courses,
Mhm.
because we have the graduate program, and some of those courses are online. So we, I think, as a department, are at an advantage in that particular area.
If you were a student right now, how would you adapt your learning techniques? Or how would you adapt the way you absorb information?
Yeah, that's tough. I'm of the person that I can't really read online, so I print everything off and all of that stuff. But Students, I have found at least that students are pretty flexible, especially who've grown up with technology and have grown up with doing stuff online. So I think the students are actually in a pretty good position. This is the one recommendation I would have for students, and that is really be open and honest with your professors, because as chair of the department, I dealt with some student issues last semester, and almost always the student would come to me and then I would talk to the professor, and the professor had no clue anything was going on. And most of it, not everyone, some professors can be jerks, we know that, but most professors at Bryant are pretty cool. And if you talk to them and say, listen, this is what's going on in my life. I had a student whose grandfather died of COVID-19 and he missed an exam because the funeral was that day. And the professor gave the student a 0 because they missed an exam. The professor had no idea what was going on. So I would say, and don't wait till the last minute, right? Be early and upfront and say, listen, I'm stressed out. I got a lot going on. This is what's going on. If you wait till the last minute, it's much more difficult for a professor to make accommodations.
What would you say to students considering taking a gap year right now?
Yeah, this is a difficult one, because if I were to say you should take a gap year, that would be against my self-interest, because we don't want students to take a gap year. But in reality, I don't know if COVID-19 would change my mind. I think a gap year is good for some students that need it, and a gap year is bad for some students that don't need it. So if you are definitely into one of those categories, I would say do what you would normally do. If you're on the fence and you have, you're kind of thinking about it and not thinking about it, that's really a judgment call on the student. I think that if you're leaning towards taking a gap year, then take the gap year, because this year is not going to be the same as other years. But I will say that, for students who do take a gap year, sometimes it's hard to get back. You start making money and it's hard to get back into it. So as an educator, I would say only take the gap year if you're sure that you only want to do it for 1 year and then come back.
So if you're a senior right now, how would you prepare yourself for like a tumultuous job market that we're facing right now, an economy that's very much in limbo? Job opportunities are kind of falling off the face of the earth here. What would you do to prepare yourself or make yourself different than the rest of the college seniors that are looking to graduate in 2021?
Yeah, so for seniors, it's a little difficult because they pretty much already have their major down, so you can't really switch your major or anything like that. But I think that there are lots of opportunities to position yourself more favorably when you do get out. So for example, hopefully this won't be going on, in a year when people graduate, but take time this year to make sure that you are up to date on the technology and that you have experiences working remotely and you're comfortable with Zoom and all of the other features. Because if you do get out and the job, and this is still an issue, which I don't think it will be, but if it is, you need to show that you can work in this environment. And I think you can do steps, this year, this upcoming year, that will help you. In regards to it being a bad, job market, the only thing I would say there is that, diversify in what you're doing as much as possible. Because let's just say you're an accounting major, but if you take some management courses, maybe there are options for you. Maybe not exactly what you want. I mean, that's one of the things we tell our students in communication is, do a bunch of different things. And that way, when you get out, you might have to sell yourself a little bit more, but at least you have experiences in a ton of different areas.
So transitioning back to Bryant a little bit more here, do you think the university will give another pass-fail option this semester? Or what do you think about that?
I'm not sure if I should say this, but they've already said they're not going to. So that was at a meeting the other day. It's not going to happen. So next semester is going to be graded regular. Now, could they change their mind? Like if we come back for a week and then everyone goes online again, possibly. But as of now, the answer is no. It's going to be a regular grading system.
So when we're coming back in the fall and we're teaching, the students are back in the classroom, what is something that you would say to students that couldn't actually make it, like you were talking about the international kids that couldn't come over,
Hmm.
and so you're teaching in front of a live audience and also an online audience? What
Hmm.
challenges would that create?
Okay, so there are a couple of things that I would say to that. First of all, this is an untested and unknown teaching style, right? So I am one of my concerns is will the faculty be up to the task, right? Because it's a lot to digest. They're setting up mock classrooms for us to go in and teach, but that's that it's incumbent upon the faculty to go do that. We also have a number of faculty who are over 65 and have conditions. So there are going to be some faculty that don't come back, and there are going to be some faculty that teach fully online. Right, but I think that just getting used to the new technology, getting used to teaching is going to be difficult. We have, the rest of the summer. So the plan for returning to Bryant was submitted to the government, to Gina Raimoto's administration last week, and we're still waiting on feedback for that. But in reality, we still don't know exactly how everything is going to go, and it makes it difficult to prepare. So I would say I'm concerns, but worries I have about the students. So first of all, I don't believe in any way, shape, or form that social distancing is going to take place down in the dorm rooms, right? And people are going to be staying 6 feet apart. I mean, people are going to be partying like normal, and I think that's going to be a problem. I also know that some students do better in the classroom and some students are better online, and how are you going to rectify that? And students don't want to spend the entire time, if they're, they don't want to sit in their dorm rooms the whole time, right? So there has to be activities for them.
Yeah, so continuing on the topic of students and your fear of them not properly social distancing, I think on my behalf, I think there's too many temptations here, right? For students in their back on campus, right, along with their friends that they haven't seen for probably close to almost 6 months. So
Hmm.
the temptations of them to socialize is far too great for them to comply with strong social distancing measures. So
Yeah.
from that point, I think you have to really focus on the Bryant's availability to just keep kids localized on campus, right? And so I think that would be a smart move for the university to look at is just localizing the kids on campus. And the plus side in our interview that I had with Steve Bannon is that 90% of the students live on campus at Bryant.
Hmm.
It's that other 10% that you just illustrated that could be a real difficulty for the controlling the disease outbreak.
Yeah, and but you can see how if one person does get it and they don't know that they're not for 2 weeks,
Hmm.
they're not symptomatic for 2 weeks, that it could quickly spread. And honestly, if that happens, I mean, the school might have to shut down again, right?
Hmm.
It just, fingers crossed that it doesn't. But look at the trends in other areas. It's not going well for us here in the United States right
Yeah.
now.
All right. So our last question here, we'll end on a positive note.
Mhm.
What is one thing you're looking forward to in the fall semester?
That's a good question. There's a lot of things that I'm looking forward to, but I'm just looking forward to getting back to work and going into my office, and not necessarily having to teach online in the same way that I have been doing, right?
Hmm.
Obviously, there are going to be some students that are online, but I'm looking forward to meeting the incoming freshmen. We have 17 incoming freshmen this year, and I've been in contact with all for communication, and I have them all in one class. So I'm looking forward to just kind of getting back into the swing of things. My kids are going back to school, and looking forward to as much of a normalcy as you can, just kind of moving forward, but still being safe, of course.
Hmm.
So.
All right. Thus concludes our interview with Dr. Pearce. I thank you very much for spending some time here
No
and
problem. Thanks for having me.
answering your questions. So thank you very much.